We are an interfaith spiritual community that honors each individual's path and the core teachings of all world religions and spiritual masters, which hold love, light, and joy to be the nature, character, and manifestation of God. Since we're that, we once in a while bring speakers from different religions, and we do not want to leave out Baha'i, one of the other world great religions. And I welcome Sam Jones to share with us. Come on up, Sam.
Well, it's wonderful to be here, and the spirit is just wonderful. So thank you. I'm always more than nervous when preparing to attempt to share the Baha'i faith. But I think the spirit here today, maybe with a little bit that I can share, you'll see that we share so deeply this belief in the oneness of humanity and the oneness of God and the oneness of all religions. I was praying and reflecting, and I thought that I might dedicate and that we might think about Michael Brown and all the Michael Browns in this country and really all over the world. And I'd like to begin, if I could, with a prayer. It's a prayer from Baha'i. Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow where mention of God had been made and his praise glorified. I thought that I might start with my journey. I grew up here in Virginia Beach, and actually it was, I'll give my age away a little bit, it was Princess Anne County at the time. And I went to John B. Nye grade school, grammar school, and Bayside, and then I went to Cox, graduated from Cox. In 1967, my parents were divorced. I lived here with my father, and my mother lived in South Florida, in the Fort Lauderdale area. And every summer, my brother Leon and I would make the trek down to Fort Lauderdale, and we arrived, and we were happy to be there. And then we were promptly told that we were going to get in a car and drive back up to Black Mountain, North Carolina, and go to a Baha'i conference. And I was 16 at the time, and I can tell you I wanted nothing to do with it. Actually, I put up quite a fit, and promptly told my mom I'll go on back and spend the summer with my dad. I really don't want to go to Black Mountain. And I had no idea what Baha'i was, or Baha'i faith. But some of the folks in this room know my stepdad, who was a second father to me. He convinced me that I was going to make the trip. And so we piled into a station wagon with Gloria Hebner, and we headed north, and we arrived at Black Mountain, North Carolina. And in 1967, this nation was in a great struggle, the great struggle of civil rights that really continues to this day. And that's why I thought that I might mention Michael Brown at the beginning here. Our cities were in great turmoil. If you remember back, they were ablaze, actually. The struggles that we were facing, trying to understand our oneness, if you will. And long story short, I spent a week on Black Mountain with people from every religion, from every nationality, from Native Americans to African Americans, Jewish ancestry, on and on and on. At the end of that week, what I experienced, I didn't know much of anything of who Baha'u'llah was, but what I experienced is much what I'm experiencing in here today. I experienced love, a sacred space where people honored and loved one another. And I came away from that and I said, I'm one of these. I want to be a Baha'i. At 18, approaching 19, I basically did the intellectual side. I did a vast amount of reading and I have not stopped, actually. And it set me on this course, this path, if you will, of life. And Baha'u'llah is an interesting name. It's an Arabic name, actually. If you translate that into English, it means the glory of God. Baha'u'llah, the glory of God. Baha'u'llah came from what we know today as Iran, and then it was Persia. And in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, we know it is Shushan and Elam. He came from that space that was prophesied so many thousands of years ago. But I think what I would like to do, I brought a chart, and I want to honor Dr. Ruth Moffat. She was an early woman, an early PhD, a woman that was one of the early female PhDs in this country. And she actually put this chart together. And I think that it'll help because from the standpoint of the Baha'i faith and the belief that there's really one God, the oneness of God, and that there's the oneness humanity, and also that all the religions are one. Baha'u'llah even goes on to say that it is blasphemy, absolute blasphemy, if we make any difference between any of the prophets of God. When I thought about, when I was asked to speak, I thought about what the topic is vast, and I'm trying to compress it and give something that will be hopefully of value and understanding. I thought back at this chart, and it's beautiful because I came up with this thought of, if you will, models of unity. And if we really look at history, we're starting, and I'm looking backwards here. Okay. We know of Adam and Eve, but Baha'u'llah said there were many Adams before Adam. And there have been many, many, many prophets or manifestations of God. And I love this chart. And Dr. Moffat used candles, which I was so pleased to see candles lighted tonight or today. Because in essence, what she is showing here is that light is light, love is love. And what we have in history are cycles. We tend, I know when I went through school, history to me seemed disjointed, not connected in any way. It seemed like there was many pieces that were separate. But in reality, what we really see, that each time one of these prophets come, and if you will, with Adam, we had the very beginnings of the understanding of choice between good and evil. We also had the concept of the coming together of man and wife. We moved from that to Abraham, one God. Moses gave us the beginning components of law, the 10 Commandments, which all law, all the way through all international law, comes from that basis, those beginning commandments. And he brought about the unity of the tribe. And so we progressed all the way through with up to Christ. We had, of course, Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, and Christ. And Christ, to me, what sums up the beauty, the utter beauty of Christ is that moment on the cross when he turned to God and said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." He loved in spite of everything. And he was changing the course of an eye for an eye, and he was calling us to love one another. So we had now the coming together of the city-state, and then you had Muhammad. We all know, many of us know the great libraries and the great learning that came out of Islam, which actually we all know the Renaissance, the name Renaissance in Europe, but it was all of that great information and learning that poured into Europe that literally changed Europe and brought us out of the Dark Age. But we had now the formation of the nation. So we began with the unity of the family, unity of one God, unity of the tribe, unity of the city-state, and unity of the nation. And the beauty of this chart is that every time God manifests himself through one of these lights, and what Dr. Moffat shows, and it's so clear that every time they speak, massive change occurs. And history bears it out. So this chart basically articulates this progressive, if you will, much like the grades of school. Christ said, "There's much I have to tell you, but you cannot bear it now. Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, shall come, he shall guide you into all truths." I love my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Fowles. I'll never forget that lady. I did not want to go to the 6th grade because of her. I didn't. I'll tell you, I just didn't want to go. Well, I went to Mrs. Hollowell's class, and I ended up loving Mrs. Hollowell. But the reality is, there is no difference. It's one solid continuum. My wife and I have had a crazy several months, and I wanted to actually get a Slinky. I don't know if you guys remember Slinkies. But I love Slinkies because a Slinky, actually, it's compressed, it's one, and then you can pull it apart. But the reality is, it's all linked together, and when you pull it back, it all touches and meshes. And in reality, what Dr. Moffat has done is shown that every time God has spoken to humanity, that humanity, the Word, the creative Word, fires the spirit of mankind and basically pushes us forward, whether we want to go or not. Now that takes us to May 23rd, 1844, a very, very significant date. And I'll let you guys sit down at this point. Thank you so much. May 23rd, 1844, in Iran, in Persia, much like John the Baptist, the Bab foretold, he came and announced that Baha'u'llah was on the earth, and that basically he would be revealing himself. And the history is fascinating. Thousands of people followed the Bab, and thousands were murdered and killed by the existing political and cleric system in Iran. But what's fascinating to me, we saw the history unfold. May 23rd, 1844, the Bab announced that this great day of God, the day that all the religions, and by the way, every one of the religions prophesied the day when the great gathering of humanity would occur. And that we know it as Christians, as the kingdom of God would be established on earth. We also know from Scripture that great knowledge would cover the earth like the oceans. May 23rd, 1844, the Bab in the East announced this great coming. And then May 23rd, 1844, here in this great land, Samuel B. Morse took a phrase out of the Old Testament and he tapped it between Washington and Baltimore, and that phrase is, "What has God wrought?" And if we were to put on a graph all of the learning and advancement of mankind up to May 23rd, 1844, and you have to think about it, there were only horse and buggies, there were sailing ships, a few steamships. We had made a little advancement. May 23rd, 1844, which directly coincides with the beginning of the Baha'i faith. If you would put a chart here, our technology has basically exploded and it's not stopped. Now, these cycles of unity, there are those that would say, well, there's not a lot of unity in the world. And that's true. But yet there is a great deal of unity in the world. And we look at, in 1863, Baha'i declared the end to slavery. He was the first prophet or manifestation of God to categorically say, it's over. It must end. The principles of the Baha'i faith, I would share, I mentioned before, the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of mankind. We know now that no one in this room is any farther away than their 20th cousin. We're all related. We're family. We are family. Baha'u'llah called for the equality of men and women. 1863 in Iran, the equality of men and women. We're still struggling with that today. Baha'u'llah called for a universal auxiliary language so that we could communicate with one another. And he called for universal education of all people. The Baha'i faith currently is the most widely spread religion in the world. We're little pockets of people all over now. I was very moved by, I'll call it your celebration here today. And I looked at this painting, and when Baha'u'llah declared himself to be the promised one of all religions, he of course was immediately imprisoned. He was put in what's called the Sea of Shaw. He was tortured beyond all belief, as all of the manifestations of God have been. They've all suffered at the hands of men, all of them. He was banished and exiled with his family from Tehran to Baghdad, from Baghdad to Constantinople, from Constantinople to Adrianople, and then from Adrianople, he was what he called sent to the most great prison, the prison of Akka, that is referred to several times in the Old Testament, Aku, right across the bay from Mount Carmel and Haifa, Israel, which today is the location of the Baha'i World Center. And I was fascinated by the painting. Because if you go online and you go see the photographs, if you will, of the Baha'i World Center, you will see 19 terraces. And the center terrace is where the remains of the Bab, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, rests today. It's a holy spot for the Baha'is from all over the world. And the gardens are exquisite. Plants from all over the world have been brought to Haifa that represent our diversity, the diversity of the human family, and yet our oneness. I said to a friend one time who couldn't quite let go of racism, and I finally told him, I said, just don't say that in front of me any longer. I can't deal with it. And I said, I've known you since the 3rd grade. And he's a big old guy. And I said, can you imagine eating scrambled eggs for every meal for the rest of your life? And he said, no. He said, obviously I love to eat. So it's this diversity, this wonderful diversity we have. And this is basically the celebration, if you will. This is the time of this great gathering of humanity. My wife often says I'm serious, way too serious. And I am much of the time. Baha'u'llah said that the old world order is being rolled up and a new one is being laid out in its stead. It is pockets of unity that I feel right here that are emerging all over the world that will be the salvation of the world. There's no question. There's no question. I think of our Buckminster Fuller, and he had a wonderful quote, a couple actually, that I really, really like. And one was, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model. Because the old one is obsolete. And we are, in reality, building these models now all over the world. There are people like us that understand this oneness and understand this love. I mentioned that I'm a surfer, and this year is 50 years at it. It's amazing, actually. I've worked with resin and fiberglass, mending my surfboards. And I like this analogy, and you can also draw the analogy with an acorn, if you will. Buckminster Fuller actually does a better job of it, and I'll just use that because of time. Buckminster Fuller says, there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. There is nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. As Baha'is, we believe that Baha'u'llah is the most recent manifestation of God, that he is the manifestation that all religions are looking for. And I thought as a young man, would God ever leave us without a direction? And the beauty of that chart that Dr. Moffat shows is he's never left us alone. Never. Every one of the progressive stages of our development, he has given us the very manifestation of himself, his essence, calling us to these new levels of unity. And today, the greatest need on this planet is the unity of the human race. Baha'u'llah says that the earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. We have a long way to go. But I see the beginning in places just like this. And I'm so thankful and honored to be here in your community and with you. And I would like to close with a prayer.